She hammered the first board with a stone because the hammer had gone missing with everything else: tools, blankets, the last sack of grain. The board was split down the middle, but she pressed it against the frame anyway, holding it with one hand while striking with the other. Each blow sent a dull ache up her arm. She welcomed it. Pain was proof she was still here. The shelter leaned toward the river, ribs of scavenged wood tied together with wire and strips torn from her wedding dress. The dress had been white once. Now it was rope. Behind her, boots shifted on gravel. She did not turn. She knew the weight of those steps, the way the ground answered them. He had walked like that since boyhood, careful, as if the earth might give way if he trusted it too much. "You'll cut yourself," he said. She drove the nail harder. It bent, then split the wood with a dry crack. "I know," she said. Silence fell again, thick and watchful. The river moved around stones like a body breathing in sleep. Smoke from her small fire curled and vanished before it could rise. He stood where her husband used to stand when the storms came, arms crossed, jaw set, pretending he wasn't afraid. The resemblance was close enough to wound her. Same shoulders, same scar near the ear. But where her husband's eyes had been warm, this man's were always holding something back. "You shouldn't be doing this alone," he said. She laughed once, short and sharp. "I am alone." He flinched, just slightly. She felt it without looking. When her husband died, the village had spoken in low voices, like death was contagious. They brought bread for 3 days. On the 4th, they brought questions. On the 5th, they brought nothing at all. By the 2nd month, even his name was used carefully, like a tool that might break if handled too often. His brother stayed. Not inside the house. Never inside. He slept in the old shed, fixed the fence without being asked, left fish on the step before dawn. He watched her like this, from a distance that pretended to be respect. She lifted another board. This one was rotted soft at the edges, but the middle held. She set it in place, her fingers numb from cold and effort. "You could come back," he said. "My place isn't far." She turned then, slow, so slow her neck ached. "Your place was his place first." He swallowed. The words landed where she meant them to. The shelter's roof was only half finished. Rain clouds pressed low, dark as bruises. She worked faster, nails clutched between her teeth, hair falling loose around her face. Every movement was stubborn, defiant, like she could build something solid enough to keep grief out. He stepped closer. Not touching. Never touching. "You don't have to punish yourself," he said. She stopped. The board slipped from her hands and hit the ground. "Don't tell me what this is," she said quietly. The wind picked up, lifting the edge of the tarp she planned to use as a door. Somewhere upstream, thunder rolled. "He loved you," he said, and the word loved sounded strange in his mouth, like a language he'd learned too late. She stared at him then, really stared, and saw what he had been carrying all this time. Not just loss. Guilt. Old, heavy, and deeply buried. "I know," she said. "That's why you're still here." His breath caught. "You think I don't see it?" She went on. "You watching me build this like you're waiting for it to fall. Like if I fail hard enough, it'll justify something in you." He opened his mouth. Closed it. She picked up the fallen board and pressed it back into place. Her hands shook now, but she did not stop. "You stood behind him the day the river took him," she said. "You told him the crossing was safe." The words settled between them, raw and exposed. "I was wrong," he whispered. "Yes," she said. "You were." Rain began to fall, light at first, then heavier, drumming against wood and water and skin. She worked through it, soaked within seconds. The shelter groaned but held. He took off his coat and held it out. She ignored it. A nail slipped. It bit into her palm, deep and sudden. Blood welled, bright against the gray day. She hissed, instinctively pulling back. He was there instantly, grabbing her wrist, firm and careful. "Let me." "Don't," she said, but she didn't pull away. He tore a strip from his shirt, wrapped her hand, his fingers trembling more than hers. "I should have gone with him," he said, the confession spilling now that the dam had cracked. "I should have taken his place." She met his eyes. "You don't get to choose who the river takes." The rain soaked them both. The shelter stood, crooked and imperfect, boards mismatched, gaps wide enough for wind and memory. She took her hand back and finished the roof. When the last nail went in, she leaned against the frame, exhausted, breathing hard. He was still there, still watching. still standing where her husband once had. This time, she did not ask him to leave. The rain thickened until it erased the far bank of the river, turning the world into a narrow circle of wet earth, crooked shelter, and the two of them breathing steam into the cold. She slid down until she was sitting against the frame, knees pulled up, arms wrapped tight around herself. Her bandaged hand throbbed in time with her pulse. He stood there uselessly for a moment, then crouched and began stacking stones around the fire pit, shielding the flame from the wind. He did it the way he did everything, quiet, precise, as if each motion might be judged by someone who was no longer watching. When the fire steadied, she felt the warmth on her shins and closed her eyes. The smell of wet wood and smoke wrapped around her, sharp and grounding. "You'll get sick," he said. She didn't answer. Silence had become a second language between them, one they both spoke fluently. After a while, he said, "I can fix the gaps." She opened her eyes. "Don't. It won't take long. I didn't build it to be fixed." That made him stop. He studied the shelter, the uneven lines, the way one wall bowed inward like a ribcage protecting something fragile. "It's meant to let the wind through," she said. "So I don't forget it's there." He nodded once, though he didn't understand. Or maybe he did and wished he didn't. Night crept in early, dragged down by clouds. The rain softened to a steady whisper. She pulled the tarp across the opening and lay down on the bed of pine needles she'd spread inside. Every bone ached. Grief was a weight that never let the body rest properly. She heard him moving outside, the scrape of boots, the clink of metal. Then nothing. For a moment, fear flared, an old reflex. She pushed herself up and peered out. He was sitting by the fire, back against a tree, coat over his knees, head tipped back to watch the rain thread through the branches. "You're not leaving," she said. "No." She lay back down, the words settling her more than she wanted to admit. Sleep came in pieces. She dreamed of water rushing through her hands, of boards floating past with her husband's face carved into them, mouths opening and closing without sound. She woke with a gasp, heart hammering. The fire had burned low. Dawn was still far off. She pushed the tarp aside and crawled out. He was asleep now, chin tucked to his chest, rain slicking his hair dark. For the first time since the funeral, she allowed herself to really look at him without armor. He was thinner than before. The lines around his mouth were deeper. Guilt had hollowed him out, same as grief had. Hollowed her. Different shapes, same emptiness. She wrapped his coat tighter around his shoulders, careful not to wake him. In the gray hours before morning, she brewed tea from dried leaves she'd gathered weeks ago, bitter but warm. When he stirred, she held the cup out without a word. "Thank you," he said softly. They drank in silence, steam rising between them like something alive. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm neither named. She stayed by the river, improving the shelter just enough to survive. He came each morning, sometimes with tools, sometimes with food, always with that careful distance that pretended not to be devotion. He showed her how to brace the roof without straightening it. She showed him which berries wouldn't poison him. When her hand healed enough to work again, she took the hammer back without ceremony. Sometimes they spoke of practical things. Weather. Wood. The way the river changed its voice before a storm. Sometimes they spoke of nothing at all. At night, when the dark pressed close and the wind found every gap, she listened to him breathing outside and felt something like safety and something like betrayal twist together in her chest. One evening, she found him standing at the river's edge, staring into the water like it might answer a question. "You shouldn't do that," she said. He didn't turn. "I know. You'll fall in. I know." She joined him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "It wasn't your fault," she said, surprising herself. He laughed, bitter and small. "You don't have to lie." "I'm not," she said. It was his choice. That day, he asked. Or all the days before it. She looked at the river, remembering her husband's stubborn smile, the way he believed strength could outmatch nature if you wanted it badly enough. "All of them," she said. He nodded, tears slipping free at last, carried away by rain. Winter crept closer. Frost silvered the ground in the mornings. The shelter held. Barely. She learned which gaps to block with moss, which to leave open so the wood could breathe. Survival became an art made of small decisions. One night, a storm came harder than the others. Wind howled down the river like a living thing. A tree cracked somewhere upstream. She woke to a violent shudder as the shelter lurched. A board tore loose, slamming against the frame. She scrambled up, heart racing. Outside, he was already moving, fighting the wind, rope clenched in his teeth. She rushed to help, shouting over the storm. Go back inside. No. They worked together, hands numb, rain stinging like thrown gravel. He braced the frame with his body while she tied the rope, fingers slipping, panic clawing up her throat. Another gust ripped through, throwing him sideways. He hit the ground hard. She screamed his name before she realized she'd done it. He looked up at her, shocked, then grimaced and got back to his feet. The shelter held. When it was over, they collapsed inside, soaked and shaking, breath fogging the air. She laughed then, wild and unrestrained, the sound tearing out of her like something long trapped. He stared at her, then started laughing too, until the laughter turned into something closer to sobbing. Without thinking, she reached for him. He froze under her hand. It's all right, she said, though she didn't know who she was trying to convince. He leaned into her touch like a man starved. They sat like that for a long time, her hand on his arm, his head bowed, grief and exhaustion tangling them together. When he finally pulled back, he did it carefully, as if afraid one wrong move would shatter what little balance they'd found. I can leave, he said hoarsely. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not a replacement, not a shadow, but a man shaped by the same loss, standing in the ruins and trying to build something that would not collapse. Don't, she said. Spring came reluctantly. Snowmelt swelled the river, turning it wild and loud. The place where her husband had vanished was no longer visible, erased by movement and time. She watched the water one morning and felt the sharp edge of memory dull, just a little. He stood beside her, hands shoved into his pockets. I'm thinking of planting here, she said suddenly, pointing to a strip of land near the shelter. He raised an eyebrow. You hate farming. I hate pretending things don't die, she said. This would be honest. He smiled, small and real. They planted seeds together. Some never sprouted. Some did, fragile green pushing through stubborn earth. At night, he still slept outside. She still slept alone. The distance remained, charged and careful, like a bridge neither was ready to cross. One evening, as the sun bled out behind the trees, she sat by the fire mending a tear in the tarp. He watched her, the way he always did, but something in his gaze had shifted. You don't have to stay, she said without looking up. I want to, he replied. The words settled into her like a promise neither of them dared define. She tied off the thread and looked at the shelter, crooked, weathered, alive with the marks of survival. She had built it from broken boards. She was still building.